It all started that sunny afternoon when I was enjoying the peace and quiet of my backyard, lounging by the pool like I had done countless times before. But this time, things were different. This time, the sound of my poolside bliss was interrupted by the shrill ring of my doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I glanced at the clock. It was barely past noon. A little confused, I stood up, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and made my way inside. I opened the door, and there she stood, Karen. Yes, the infamous HOA Karen, the one everyone in the neighborhood talked about. She was holding a phone in one hand, her face flushed red with anger, and her lips twisted in an almost theatrical snarl. "You," she started, pointing a finger at me as if I had done something terribly wrong. "You're not allowed to use the pool. My kids have every right to enjoy it, and you—" She paused dramatically. "You have to leave now, or else—" I stared at her, completely caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" I asked, still not fully grasping the situation. "I've already called 911, Karen snapped, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "You're not supposed to be here. And if you don't leave right now, I'll make sure the police know exactly what you're doing." Before I could even react, I saw her eyes darting over my shoulder, as if she was looking for an audience for her little performance. The situation was spiraling fast, and I didn't know what to do. My heart raced, and a knot formed in my stomach. "Are you serious?" I asked, a tinge of disbelief creeping into my voice. "Don't act dumb," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "You've been warned before, but you never listen. Now, you're going to pay for it. The pool is for the residents, and my kids deserve it. Not you." She stood there, practically daring me to challenge her. I had been a resident here for years, paid my dues on time, and followed the rules. But this was something new. The HOA had never pulled something like this before. A sense of shock washed over me as I tried to process what was happening. My brain scrambled for words, but they didn't come. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, closer. "What have you done?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Karen smirked, a cruel glint in her eyes. "Let's see how the police handle you." The sirens were blaring now, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I couldn't help but wonder. What had I done to deserve this? I had always been a good neighbor, always paid my dues, and had never caused any trouble. But somehow, I found myself here, standing on my doorstep, facing a woman who was hell-bent on ruining my day, and maybe even my life. As the squad cars pulled up outside, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. I had no idea how this was going to end, but I knew for sure it wasn't going to be good. The story didn't begin like this, of course. Things had been peaceful for a while, and life had been moving along just fine. I had spent the past few months working from home, taking care of my house, and enjoying the company of my family. The neighborhood was quiet, and I had always gotten along with most of the people around here. Well, almost everyone. Karen had always been a bit of an enigma. She was the type of person who liked to be in charge, the type who would make a big deal out of the smallest things, and who would walk around like she owned the place, as if her opinion was the only one that mattered. I had seen her a few times before, always standing by the HOA's bulletin board, talking to anyone who would listen about how things should be done. But I never thought she would target me. After all, I had always followed the rules. It was a Saturday morning when I first noticed Karen eyeing my pool. The sun was shining, and I had just finished cleaning the pool, getting it ready for a quiet weekend of relaxation. I had barely settled into my chair when I noticed her standing near the gate, watching me. She wasn't alone. Her two kids, Noah and Lily, were with her, both of them pointing at the pool. I waved a quick hello, thinking nothing of it. But Karen didn't wave back. Instead, she stared at me, her eyes narrowing in what I could only describe as judgment. "Looks nice, doesn't it?" I called out, trying to break the tension. She didn't respond immediately. Her kids, however, seemed to be much more vocal. "Can we swim, Mom? Please?" Noah asked, his voice pleading. Karen didn't answer him right away. Instead, she turned to me, her lips curling into a tight smile. "You know, it's a shame," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "The pool is for everyone, but not everyone gets to use it. Some of us pay the HOA fees, and some of us, well, we don't." I frowned, unsure of what she meant, but before I could ask, she turned and walked away, Noah and Lily following closely behind her. It didn't seem like much at the time, but looking back, that moment felt like the beginning of something that was going to change everything. The next few days passed without incident, but then, one afternoon, I noticed the HOA notice taped to my door. It was a reminder about pool usage, with a big bold message in the center. "Unauthorized usage of the pool will not be tolerated." I stared at it, the words feeling like a slap in the face. I had been a good tenant, I had followed all the rules. But now, suddenly, I was being accused of something I didn't even understand. And that was the moment I realized that something was brewing beneath the surface, something that was much bigger than just a simple misunderstanding. Something that would soon unravel in ways I couldn't have predicted. But I never imagined it would all come to a head like this. Not in a million years. Just as I was about to go inside, the doorbell rang. I didn't think much of it at first, until I saw Karen's face through the window. The smirk on her lips told me everything I needed to know. Something was happening, and I wasn't prepared for it. I opened the door, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. "You're banned from the pool, and I've already called 911. You're about to find out just how serious I am." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of it all. And then, as if on cue, the sirens grew louder. What had just happened? Was this really happening? It was only the beginning, but I had no idea how deep this was going to go. The sound of the sirens grew louder, closer, as if the police were coming to arrest me for some terrible crime I didn't even understand. My mind raced, my body frozen in place as I stared at Karen's smug expression. She was practically basking in her own self-righteousness, arms folded as she stood there like she had already won. "What do you think they'll do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though a tinge of panic crept into my words. Karen didn't even flinch. "The police will deal with you. They'll make sure you understand the rules around here. You've been warned enough times, and now it's time to face the consequences." I couldn't believe it. I had lived in this neighborhood for years, and I had always followed the rules, never caused trouble, paid my dues on time, and yet now I was being accused of breaking some vague, invisible rule that had never been clearly communicated. And all because Karen didn't like the idea of me using the pool. The sirens were deafening now, the flashing lights of the police cars lighting up my front yard. My heart pounded in my chest. I stepped back, but Karen was already moving toward the gate, clearly expecting me to follow. "Go ahead," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You'll get what's coming to you." I didn't know what to do. Should I run inside and lock the door? Should I just wait for the police to show up? Either way, I was caught in a nightmare I didn't understand. There was no way I could have predicted this. It felt like the world was spinning out of control. The front door opened, and 2 police officers stepped onto the porch. One of them, a tall man with a stern face, immediately looked at Karen. "Ma'am, what's the problem here?" Karen didn't waste any time. She pointed at me, her finger like a dagger aimed straight at my heart. "This person has been breaking the HOA's rules by using the pool without permission. I've asked them several times to stop, but they just won't listen. I'm tired of dealing with this. I want them removed from the property." I was about to speak, to explain myself, but the officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, calm down. Let's take a moment here." Karen's face flushed a deep red, but she didn't back down. "I've had enough of this. You need to make them leave right now. The officer looked at me, then back at Karen. We'll need to take your side into consideration, sir, he said, his tone more neutral now, but there was a hint of caution in his eyes. What's your name? John, I said, trying to steady my breathing. John Brooks. I live here with my wife and 2 kids. The officer nodded. And what happened with the pool, Mr. Brooks? I quickly tried to explain, the words tumbling out in a rush. I've been using the pool for years. I've never had a problem with it. I've always followed the rules, paid my dues. But Karen, I glanced at her. She just came over and accused me of using it without permission. The officer looked over at Karen again, his gaze hardening. Ma'am, are you saying Mr. Brooks isn't allowed to use the pool? Karen crossed her arms and stood taller, as if she was on the verge of victory. Yes, he's been warned multiple times, and he just doesn't listen. It's time for him to learn that the rules apply to everyone. The officer took a deep breath and looked at his partner, who had been silent until now. The second officer, a younger woman, nodded and then looked back at me. Mr. Brooks, we don't have a record of any complaints about you using the pool. But you're saying there's an issue? I nodded, still trying to piece everything together. I don't know what's going on. I've never done anything wrong. I've always paid my dues, followed the HOA's guidelines. But Karen, she's making it seem like I'm the one causing trouble. The officers exchanged glances. The tension was thick, the air heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, the first officer spoke. We'll need to investigate this further. But for now, I suggest you stay off the pool until we get everything sorted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What? But I have every right to use the pool. I'm a paying resident here. The officer's expression softened, but his stance didn't change. I understand, Mr. Brooks, but we'll have to follow protocol. Please cooperate for now. We'll get back to you once we've had a chance to talk to the HOA. I felt a wave of frustration and disbelief crash over me. The whole situation was spiraling, and I didn't know what to do. The officers, Karen, and the flashing lights outside, it felt like a bad dream. As they walked off the porch, I watched them head back to their squad cars, Karen trailing behind, still looking victorious. I stood there in stunned silence, my mind racing. What had just happened? And more importantly, what was going to happen next? The next few hours felt like a blur. I was stuck in a limbo of confusion and anxiety, my phone buzzing with messages, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. All I could think about was the look on Karen's face, the way she had stood there, triumphant, as if she had already won. But this wasn't over. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not like this. But then, as I paced back and forth in the living room, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my neighbor, Ben. He had been watching from his porch across the street and had seen everything unfold. Hey man, what's going on? The message read. I saw the cops show up. Is everything okay? I typed back quickly, my fingers shaking. No, it's not. Karen just called the cops on me for using the pool. I don't even know why. Ben replied almost immediately. What? That's crazy. I know you've been using that pool for years. I'll come over and talk to the cops with you. Maybe we can clear this up. The offer was a small comfort, but it gave me a glimmer of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe I could find a way to fix this, to prove that I hadn't done anything wrong. But just as I was about to message Ben back, another notification popped up on my phone. It was from the HOA. And when I opened the message, my heart sank. It was a formal notice. A notice of violation. It looked like the battle with Karen was only just beginning, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to be easy. The notice of violation sat on my phone screen, the words almost too much to comprehend. Failure to comply with HOA regulations regarding pool use was at the top, followed by a list of supposed offenses that seemed completely out of the blue. I felt my pulse quicken as I read through the entire message, which outlined penalties, fees, and even potential legal action if I didn't rectify the situation. I sat down heavily on the couch, the weight of the words pressing down on me. I had always been a responsible homeowner. I had always followed the rules, paid my dues, and kept to myself. But somehow, I was now the one being accused of breaking them. Karen had managed to turn the entire neighborhood against me with nothing but a false accusation and a few calls to the police. I stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. Why was this happening? How had it all escalated so quickly? One minute, I was just enjoying my pool on a sunny day, and the next, my life felt like it was unraveling before my eyes. Just as I was starting to process the situation, I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face anyone, but I had a feeling it was Ben. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there he was, standing in his usual laid-back manner with a sympathetic smile on his face. "Hey, man," he said, stepping inside. I saw the notice. What the hell is going on? I ran my hand through my hair in frustration. "I don't know, Ben. Karen called the cops on me for using the pool, and now the HOA's involved. They've sent me this notice of violation. I've never had a problem with the pool before, and now I'm the bad guy. What am I supposed to do?" Ben shook his head. "That's insane. I've known you for years, John. You've always followed the rules. This whole thing smells fishy." "I know," I replied, pacing back and forth. "But Karen's got this whole thing rigged. I'm telling you, she's been waiting for a chance to get me out of here." Ben glanced at the notice in my hand. "She's been on your case for a while now, huh? I remember when she started making noise about the pool a few weeks ago. I didn't think it would escalate like this." "It's not just the pool," I said, shaking my head. "She's made other comments over the years, little things here and there. It's like she's been watching me, waiting for me to slip up." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Have you spoken to the HOA about this? I mean, it's got to be a misunderstanding, right?" "I tried to reach out," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "But it's like talking to a brick wall. They're not giving me any answers. And Karen, she's making it worse. I don't know what else to do." Ben sat down next to me on the couch. "Look, we need to fight this. I know it's going to be tough, but you can't just let her win. I'll back you up. We'll get the truth out there." I appreciated Ben's support more than he knew, but I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. Karen had a way of twisting things to her advantage, and I had a feeling this wasn't going to end with just a simple phone call. The HOA wasn't going to let me off the hook so easily. The next day, I took Ben's advice and called the HOA office. I was put on hold for what felt like an eternity before I finally spoke to someone. Her name was Donna, and she sounded nice enough, but the moment I mentioned the notice of violation, her tone shifted. "Mr. Brooks, I'm afraid there's nothing we can do about that right now," she said. "The HOA board has reviewed the situation, and they've decided that you are in violation of pool usage regulations." "What regulations? I've never been told about any of this," I said, my voice rising. "I've been using the pool for years, and no one's ever had a problem with it before." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Brooks," Donna replied, her voice calm but distant. "But the decision has been made. If you wish to appeal, you'll have to submit a formal request in writing. The board will review it at their next meeting." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you're telling me I have to wait until your board feels like reviewing this? This isn't right." "I'm afraid that's the process, sir," Donna said, and I could almost hear her shrug through the phone. "Is there anything else I can assist you with?" I wanted to scream. But instead, I hung up the phone, my frustration bubbling over. The whole thing felt like a game, and I was the pawn. As I sat down again, trying to collect my thoughts, a thought crossed my mind. Was this just about the pool? Or was there something more to it? Had Karen been angling for this for months? It didn't add up. A few days passed, and I continued to try and get through to the HOA, but it was like talking to a wall. No one seemed willing to help. Meanwhile, Karen had taken her crusade to new heights, posting about it on the neighborhood Facebook group. She painted herself as the hero, the one who was simply standing up for the rules. The comments on her post were mostly supportive. I tried to ignore it, but the more I read, the angrier I became. I couldn't believe how easily she had turned the whole neighborhood against me. I was the villain in her story, and there was nothing I could do to change that. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about my reputation, my life here. Karen had managed to tarnish everything with a few well-placed words, and I felt helpless. But I couldn't let this go on forever. That night, I decided to take action. I called a few neighbors, including Ben, and asked if they'd be willing to meet with me. We needed to come up with a plan. If Karen wanted a fight, I was going to give her one. The next morning, I went to the HOA office again, this time in person. I was determined to get answers, no matter what. As I walked through the front doors, I felt a mixture of nerves and resolve. I was about to face the very people who could make or break my life in this neighborhood, and I wasn't leaving without a resolution. I walked up to the front desk and introduced myself. The receptionist smiled but quickly became businesslike as I mentioned my case. She nodded and told me to wait. I had no idea what was coming, but I was ready to face it head on. And then, just as I was about to sit down, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Through the glass doors of the office, I could see Karen walking toward the building. What was she doing here? Was she trying to get to the HOA before me? Suddenly, I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I was about to find out. I froze for a moment, watching Karen approach the front doors of the HOA office. The sight of her was like a punch to the gut. Was she here to try and get the upper hand before I could speak to anyone? My thoughts raced as I wondered what she was up to now. Had she planned this all along? I glanced around the office lobby, looking for any way to make sure I wouldn't be caught off guard. I didn't want to deal with her in front of the board or any of the staff. If she was here to make more trouble, I had to be ready for it. Just as Karen reached the door, the receptionist called out to me, "Mr. Brooks, you're up next." I hesitated for a second before walking up to the desk, keeping my eyes on Karen, who had now stepped into the lobby. Her eyes were locked on mine, and the tension between us was palpable. She wasn't here to simply have a civil conversation. No, she was ready for war. I walked up to the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here to speak with the board about the violation notice I received." The receptionist nodded, handing me a clipboard with some paperwork to sign. I quickly scribbled my name, trying not to let my nerves show. I glanced again at Karen, who was now talking to another staff member at the desk. She seemed oddly calm, but there was an air of satisfaction about her, as if she knew something I didn't. Once I finished the paperwork, the receptionist gestured toward a door in the back of the office. "Please go ahead and take a seat in the conference room. The board will be with you shortly." I nodded and walked toward the back, but as I passed Karen, she gave me a smirk that made my blood boil. She was clearly enjoying every second of this. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. She had made it personal. I entered the conference room and sat at the large table, trying to collect my thoughts. My heart was racing. I was about to face the HOA board, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Would they listen to me, or was I already doomed? A few minutes passed, and then the door opened. A middle-aged man in a suit walked in first, followed by two women and a younger man, all dressed in similar business attire. They were the board members. Each of them gave me a polite nod as they took their seats, but I could tell that the atmosphere wasn't exactly warm. The man at the head of the table cleared his throat. "Mr. Brooks," he began, his voice firm but not unkind, "I understand you wish to discuss the notice of violation you received regarding the pool. We've reviewed your case and we're here to listen to your side of the story." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. This was it. The moment that could change everything. I had to make them understand. "I've lived in this neighborhood for years," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've always followed the rules. I've always paid my dues. But now, I'm being accused of violating some pool rule I didn't even know existed. I don't understand how this happened. The board members exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. One of the women, who I recognized as the HOA treasurer, spoke up. "Mr. Brooks, it's not just about the pool usage. The issue here is that there have been multiple complaints about your behavior in the community, particularly about your use of the pool. It seems you've ignored repeated warnings." I felt my stomach drop. Complaints? What complaints? I had no idea what she was talking about. "I've never received any complaints," I said, my voice rising slightly. "This is the first time I'm hearing about this." The man at the head of the table, who seemed to be the president of the board, looked at me with a neutral expression. "We understand that, Mr. Brooks, but the HOA has a responsibility to address concerns raised by residents. We have a process in place to review these complaints, and it seems there's a pattern of disregard for the community rules." I was stunned. "A pattern?" "I've been a model resident. I've never caused any issues here. You can check the records. I've always been compliant." The president of the board sighed, as if tired of the conversation already. "This isn't about your compliance record. This is about the overall community atmosphere. We can't have one person disregarding the rules and causing disruptions. Karen has raised concerns, and the HOA has to take them seriously." Karen. Of course. She was behind all of this. I looked around the room, trying to gauge the reactions of the board members. They all seemed so calm, so detached from the situation. It was as if they had already made up their minds. I had no idea how much influence Karen had over them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was facing an uphill battle. "Let me be clear," I said, trying to hold my ground. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not trying to cause any disruptions. All I want is to enjoy the amenities I'm paying for, just like everyone else. I don't understand why Karen is making this so personal." The board members were silent for a moment. Then, the woman who had spoken earlier, the treasurer, spoke again. "We understand your frustration, Mr. Brooks, but Karen's concerns are valid. She's not the only one who's complained, and we've had several reports of unsanctioned pool usage." My heart sank. Unsanctioned pool usage? I've been using the pool for years. No one ever told me there was a problem. "I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks," the president of the board said, his tone suddenly cold. "But the board has decided to uphold the violation notice. You'll need to cease using the pool until further notice." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe it. No warning, no explanation, just a decision made without any real investigation. It felt like they had already made up their minds, and I was the scapegoat. "Is there anything else I can do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The president shook his head. "At this point, the decision stands. If you wish to appeal, you'll have to submit another request, but for now, you're banned from the pool." I felt a surge of anger, but I bit my tongue. I had to remain calm. This wasn't over. I would fight this, no matter what. As I stood up to leave, Karen's smug face flashed in my mind. She had won this round, but I wasn't giving up. Not yet. But as I walked out of the conference room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being set up, and I had a feeling Karen wasn't done with me yet. The weight of the board's decision settled over me like a heavy blanket. I left the meeting room with my head spinning, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. How had things gotten this far? All I wanted was to enjoy my pool and live a peaceful life, but now I was banned from using it, and the HOA had turned its back on me. The sense of injustice burned in my chest. I walked out of the HOA office, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. I could feel Karen's eyes on me, even though she wasn't physically there. She had won, at least for now, but I wasn't ready to give up. I couldn't let her tear down everything I had worked for, not without a fight. I reached my car, but before I could even get inside, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, already dreading what I might find. It was a message from Ben. "Hey man, I saw what happened at the meeting. I'm really sorry, but don't give up. We'll figure this out. His words were comforting, but they didn't erase the sting of defeat. I had just been banned from the very thing I had paid for, the very thing I thought I had a right to enjoy. And all because of Karen. I typed back quickly, trying to sound more hopeful than I felt. Thanks, Ben. I'm not giving up, but I need help. I'm not going down without a fight. I slid into my car, the engine roaring to life as I made my way home. I needed to think, to come up with a plan. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When I got home, my wife, Sarah, was sitting at the kitchen table looking through some paperwork. She looked up when she heard the door open. "Hey, how'd it go?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I sat down across from her, running a hand through my hair. "It's bad, Sarah, really bad. The HOA just banned me from the pool. They said I'm in violation of some rule I've never even heard of. They won't even let me use it anymore." Her eyes widened in shock. "What? That's insane. How can they just do that without any warning?" "I don't know," I replied, the frustration in my voice rising again. "Karen's behind all of this. She's been complaining about me for weeks, and now the board's siding with her." Sarah's expression hardened. "I knew she was trouble from the start. You've always been a good neighbor. This isn't fair." I could hear the anger in her voice, and I knew she was just as upset as I was. "I don't know what else to do. I've tried to talk to the HOA, but they won't listen. They just keep saying I'm in violation, even though I've followed every rule." Sarah stood up and started pacing. "We need to fight this. We can't just let her win. Let's go to the next HOA meeting, get other neighbors on our side, and show them that Karen's the one causing all the trouble." I looked up at her, surprised by the determination in her voice. "You really think that'll work?" She stopped pacing and looked me in the eye. "I know it will. We've got friends in this neighborhood. If we stand up together, we can make them listen." Her words gave me a glimmer of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in this fight. Maybe there were other people who were just as fed up with Karen and her constant meddling as I was. I picked up my phone again and called Ben. "Hey, I've got an idea," I said when he answered. "We need to get a group together, neighbors, people who know what's really going on. If we show the HOA that they can't just pick on me, we might have a chance." "Count me in," Ben said without hesitation. "I'll talk to a few people. We'll get this sorted." The next few days were a blur of phone calls, texts, and organizing. Ben helped rally the neighbors who were willing to stand up to Karen, while Sarah and I worked on a plan to confront the HOA at the next board meeting. The more I talked to people, the more I realized that Karen wasn't as beloved in the community as she liked to think. A lot of people were tired of her constant complaints, her rules-obsessed nature, and the way she seemed to think she was in charge of everything. When the day of the next HOA meeting finally arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I wasn't sure if this was going to work, but I had to try. If Karen thought she could get away with bullying me, she was sorely mistaken. We arrived at the meeting a little early, hoping to get a seat at the front. As soon as I walked in, I saw Karen sitting in her usual spot, her eyes scanning the room with a sense of superiority. She didn't notice me at first, but I could feel her gaze shift in my direction as I made my way to an empty seat. I sat down, my hands resting on the table, and waited for the meeting to begin. Ben, Sarah, and a few other neighbors who had joined our cause filtered in and took their seats around me. We were ready to make our voices heard. The meeting started, and the board members began discussing the usual community matters, trash pickup, landscaping, and so on. But I could tell that Karen was growing impatient. She wanted to get to the pool issue, to make sure her victory was sealed. I could see the smugness in her eyes as she waited for her moment to speak. Finally, the board president called for new business, and Karen wasted no time. "Mr. Brooks has been using the pool without permission," she began, her voice as sharp as ever. "He's been repeatedly warned, and yet he continues to disregard the rules. I've done everything I can to make sure the pool is for the residents who follow the guidelines, but he just won't listen." I took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of the room on me. It was time to speak up. I'm here to address the issue Karen's been bringing up, I said, standing up. I've followed all the rules. I've never done anything wrong. But Karen's personal vendetta against me has led to this ridiculous situation. She's been accusing me of things that aren't true. There was a murmur of agreement from the neighbors who had gathered to support me. I looked around, seeing a few nodding heads, a few supportive glances. Karen's eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing. The board members exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure how to proceed. This isn't just about the pool, I continued, my voice growing more confident. It's about fairness. It's about standing up to someone who's been causing division in this community for too long. I paused, looking directly at the board members. I've always followed the rules. I've been a good neighbor, and I'm not going to let Karen's personal grievances take away my right to enjoy the amenities I've paid for. The board president looked at me, then at Karen, and then back at the room. The silence was thick, but it was clear that something had shifted. For the first time, it seemed like Karen wasn't going to get everything she wanted. But just as I thought we might finally get a fair hearing, the board president spoke up. "We'll take your concerns into consideration, Mr. Brooks," he said, "but we'll need to meet again next week to make a final decision." Next week. I had fought so hard for this moment, and now I was being told I had to wait even longer. The frustration bubbled up again, but I bit my tongue. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. As the meeting continued, I knew the battle was far from won. Karen was still a formidable opponent, and the HOA was clearly divided. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going down without a fight. And I had a feeling Karen hadn't seen the last of me. The week dragged on, each day feeling heavier than the last. The uncertainty hung in the air like a storm cloud, and it seemed like Karen's influence over the HOA was only growing stronger. But I wasn't giving up. I had spent the past few days rallying more support, talking to neighbors, and preparing for the final showdown. This was it, the last chance to make things right. The day of the final HOA meeting arrived, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had no idea how it was going to go. On one hand, the support from the neighbors who were backing me up gave me some hope. On the other hand, Karen was relentless, and I could see how much sway she had over the board. I walked into the meeting room, my heart pounding. The board members were already seated at the table, their faces a mix of professionalism and discomfort. Karen was there too, sitting with her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. She had no idea what was coming. The meeting started, and as usual, the board went over the usual business. But I could feel the tension building. Karen was getting antsy, her eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. She was eager to get to the pool issue, to finish what she had started. But this time, I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. Finally, the board president cleared his throat. "Let's move on to new business. The matter of Mr. Brooks's violation notice." Karen straightened in her chair, her eyes narrowing with anticipation. I could feel the heat of her stare, but I refused to back down. I stood up, ready to speak my piece. "Once again," I began, my voice steady but filled with determination, "I'm here to address this ridiculous accusation. I've followed every rule, and I have the support of many of my neighbors here. Karen has been targeting me for weeks, and I won't stand for it anymore." There was a noticeable murmur from the people who had gathered to support me. I could see some of the board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I had their attention, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. "Karen," I continued, turning to face her, "you've been using your position to manipulate the board, to turn people against me. You've made this personal, and I'm not the only one who's had enough. You've pushed too far." Karen stood up, her face flushed with fury. "How dare you accuse me of—" But before she could finish, one of the board members, an older woman I hadn't seen speak much, interrupted. "Enough, Karen. Let him finish." The room went silent. Karen's face turned an even deeper shade of red, but she didn't speak again. I took a deep breath and pressed on. "I'm not here to attack you, Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "But this isn't about the pool anymore. This is about the way you've treated me and others in this neighborhood. You've used the HOA to bully and control people for far too long, and I'm done letting you get away with it." I could see Karen's fingers twitching, but she was still silent. The room was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. It was now or never. "I've always been a good neighbor," I said, turning back to the board. "I've followed the rules, paid my dues, and respected the community. But Karen has made it clear that she has no respect for anyone else. She's only interested in her own agenda, and I won't stand by and let her destroy everything I've worked for." The board president looked at the other members, his face a mask of indecision. "We appreciate your input, Mr. Brooks, but we need to make a decision. Let's take a brief recess and discuss this privately." As they filed out of the room, I felt the air around me shift. This was it. The final decision was coming, and I had no idea which way it would go. I could only hope that the support from my neighbors would make a difference. A few minutes later, the board returned to the room, and the president stood up to speak. "We've had a chance to review everything," he began, his voice steady. "We've listened to both sides, and we've come to a decision." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The president looked at Karen first. "Karen, we've taken your concerns seriously, but after reviewing the situation, we've concluded that the violation notice was issued without proper grounds. Mr. Brooks has been a resident in good standing, and there's no evidence to support your claims." My breath caught in my throat. Was this really happening? Were they actually siding with me? "We've also heard from several other residents," the president continued, "and it seems that your actions have caused more division in the neighborhood than you may have realized. We can no longer allow one person to hold this much influence over the HOA." Karen's face was a picture of shock. She opened her mouth to protest, but the board president held up his hand. "Karen," he said, his voice firm, "we've decided to revoke the violation notice and lift the ban on Mr. Brooks' pool usage. However, we are also going to ask you to step down from your position on the board. Your behavior has been disruptive, and we can't allow that to continue." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It felt like a dream. Karen was being removed from the board, and I was being cleared of all accusations, but the wildest part was yet to come. Karen stood there, stunned and speechless, as the board president wrapped up the meeting. "This meeting is adjourned. Mr. Brooks, you may resume using the pool. We will notify you of any further developments regarding this issue." As the room began to empty, I felt a rush of relief. I had won. But as I made my way to the door, I heard a voice behind me. "You think you've won, don't you?" Karen's voice was low, almost a hiss. I turned to face her, my heart still pounding. "What are you talking about?" She smirked, her eyes narrowing. "You may have won this round, but you've made an enemy for life, and trust me, I always get the last word."